After a crazy March, April brought things back down to earth and got us back to where we have been rather than continuing that crazy pace. So, in this video, I'm going to take you through everything that happened in April, look into a little bit of the factors that seem to be starting to have an impact in May, and look forward as far as we can to understand exactly what is coming. So, mortgage rates basically stayed flat. There was a little bit of volatility, not as much as I was expecting, but it didn't really play much of a role in what happened in April. Inventory ended up a little bit, which is normal this time of year. And I expect we're going to stay about in this place. Typically, we may rise a little bit more through June. We could fall a little bit through June as well. But typically, after that point is when we start to see the inventory pick back up again. So we'll keep an eye on that for sure. Days on market are rising. And I'm going to point that out in both of these pockets, in both the single family and the condo slash townhouse world, because that is typically symptomatic of what is happening in the market, right? How anxious buyers are, or how potentially much sellers continue to reach on prices. And speaking of prices, again, they're increasing again for condos, back up to 8% year over year median, but they're leveling out for single family homes. Now, you may look at these numbers and say, how is 8% rising and 10% year over year for single families is leveling out? I'll show you on those charts as we get to them. Now, not too much to highlight here, but the big thing is that last month we had a huge boon in the single family world as to the closing list to sale price ratio. Now things have come crashing back to earth, down back towards 94%, whereas the condo world is very, very consistent. And again, that is kind of the message here this month is the condo world still seems to always find a way. Single family, there tends to be a little bit more volatility there. Now, new listings, again, those came crashing back to earth as well, which was a little bit expected. If we look at them on a first 4 months of the year basis, we are only up about 20 homes or 20 new listings compared to the year prior to 2024 over the same period of time, January through April. And the amount that have gone under contract during that same period of time, we've seen about 18 more. So there's really almost a one-for-one trade-off there, despite, again, the unevenness that you see if you were to look back at last year, the first 4 months compared to here, where we have these three pretty low months and then that spike in March. And last year was a little bit more consistent. And I have no rhyme or reason for what the heck happened in March. It seems to have been driven mostly by people listing their homes. Buyer pool is still out there. It was then, it is now, and it's just, buyers waiting for well-priced, good quality homes. Closed sales, again, we're seeing a spike here based off of that activity last month, which is all well and good. But single family, the months of inventory is still very stable. This time of year last year was on the rise. This time of year 2 years ago was a little bit all over the place. But, this market is still extremely strong in the single family world. We're seeing some very high end or high priced new construction, especially continuing to go under contract, sometimes regardless of a location. That may have withheld it in the past, but nowadays people seem to want what they want. They want the big space, they want the amenities. And the big thing is the quality of the build too. Again, there are certain builders whose homes are selling way faster and for way more than others, but I'll save that for another day for sure. Now, these single family homes, median prices, again, we see a little bit of a wave going on here. That doesn't spook me. I think a little bit of variation around where we are should be expected with no massive gains, but also no massive drops. And those days on market, like I mentioned, right, are continuing to rise. We've been seeing that for the better part of the last year. And I see no real reason to anticipate that we should continue on that steep trajectory. And I don't really think we're going to come back down to, I think we'll float around that 60 to 65 days for the foreseeable future. But the months of inventory for condos, again, rinse and repeat. Same thing I've been saying every month for years now. Incredibly stable, right? Slight seller's market. And sellers tend to have more power in the condo space than they may in the single family world because of that. Prices are as consistently rising as you can possibly get. Again, they did flatline a little bit over the second half, or really most of 2024, but they are certainly on the rise again here in 2025. And because of that, again, we did see a nice trend in the days on market rising up. The last 3 months, we're waiting for a few closings still to be logged in the system before I can actually calculate the true days on market, but I don't anticipate that they're going to jump up to continue that upward trend. I think we'll flatline again in that 50 to 55 space for the time being, similar to how we're going to flatline in the single family space. Speed, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. After an incredibly fast March, yeah, we had a slower April, but at the same time, again, we saw the same thing last year. That's to be expected. That is a new listings to under contract ratio. And when we have fewer new listings, things tend to slow down. And that tracks. Again, we're very, very consistent, very flat, really, over the better part of the last year, year and a half, after we did see a spike toward the end of 2022 as interest rates, if you can recall, really spiked and swung up after in the first part of that year being still extraordinarily low. That was really our transition period, and that reflects that change. Now, what's coming? And I want to tell you a couple stories here. I'm not really going to read off of this. You can feel free to pause and check it out yourself if you'd like. But what I'm seeing here, boots on the ground, there are still buyers that are reaching out, that are ready to buy, that are excited to buy, that have life circumstances that are maybe, pushing them to do it now. There are others who are waiting for something to drop, for something to change. They're looking around at the external environment with everything going on and thinking that there's going to be some opportunities coming up. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. Usually, when there's uncertainty, there is opportunity. And the longer that uncertainty sticks, some people decide it's time, right? Some sellers may say, you know what, we tried at our number for a long time. We're just ready to move on now. I would expect to see some of that probably in the fall and into the winter, which is what always used to happen. But we got off pattern and we hadn't really seen that. Everybody kept holding their ground forever, it seemed. So I do think that's going to change. But one other thing I want to mention is that it certainly seems that a lot of sellers, and a lot of the inventory that's out there, continues to sit out there because the sellers are holding their ground, whether that is, hey, I will only sell if I can walk away with blank, or, whatever reason they may have not to budge. They're really not that motivated. And why we saw the big influx of homes going under contract in March was we had more reasonably priced, more motivated sellers. We had people who were wanting to move on, wanting to make a change, and the buyers were ready and willing. So I don't think it's ever the case that the buyers just don't exist. And that continues to be proven time and time again. And I do think we have a good portion of the inventory out there, the 248, give or take, that I would just call stale inventory that's been out there for 6+ months, where there haven't really been price changes, price reductions. Same homes come off and on the market at the same price. So I think that 248, even though that's an already low number compared to historical standards here in Ocean City, I think that's still pretty inflated. Now, again, you can make the argument that I'm sure back then when there were 5, 6, 700 active listings, there was a portion of that population, right, where they were stale listings too. So while I don't want to read too much into it, what I do want to mention and what I truly believe has happened over March and April, it's kind of proven that the inventory is going to drive everything, right? There are always a certain subset of buyers looking here in Ocean City who have a sense for what's fair and what's reasonable. And they're not going to buy because they don't have to, right? They will rent for another year. They will stay in their family house instead of buying a second one, whatever it is. That really proved itself for me. So if you are looking to sell, if you have your home on the market, you definitely want to have that conversation about what it takes to make sure that you do sell, because something that I have seen in some pockets is there is actual competition now for sellers. Again, despite the low number, tends to be in the condo complexes where you have a replicable unit for the most part. You can lose your leverage really fast. If you have a unique property, you will always have a little more leverage than somebody who has, again, your standard 3-bed, 2-bath. So it's something that warrants a conversation for sure, especially the ever-changing environment, how buyers are feeling. So with that said, thank you as always for hanging out with me. If you haven't already, please make sure you subscribe down below. There will always be more content coming your way just about Ocean City real estate. And if you have any questions, you can reach me any of the ways you see in the description. So I will see you on the next video.